What if the smartest person in the room was the one everyone doubted? A black teen girl walked into a math competition, finished faster than anyone. The judges didn't congratulate her. They accused her of cheating. But when she stood up and showed them a method no one had ever seen before, the whole room had to rethink who belongs at the top. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another voice fighting to be heard. Aaliyah Johnson sat in the far corner of the gymnasium, her pencil tapping nervously against her clipboard. Rows of students from different schools filled the fold-out chairs, each wearing their school's math team shirt. Banners from local sponsors hung from the walls, and the scent of stale popcorn mixed with floor polish lingered in the air. It was the day of the Regional Math Invitational. A stage was set at the front, with long folding tables for the judges. 3 older men in matching navy blazers. At the center sat Mr. Cartwright, head judge for the 5th year running. His reputation? Legendary, and not in a good way. Mr. Cartwright didn't like surprises or creativity, and especially not students who didn't fit the mold. Aaliyah had learned that the hard way. Her previous year's performance at district level ignored. Her requests for extra practice resources denied. And now, sitting here again, she could already feel his gaze drifting toward her every few minutes. The competition began with a written round, 40 questions in 60 minutes. As she flipped through the paper, Aaliyah's heart raced. Quadratic optimizations, geometric proofs, nonlinear systems. Her eyes lit up. This was her language. She pulled her curly hair into a messy bun, rolled up her sleeves, and attacked the problems with rapid-fire intensity. Her pencil moved almost faster than she could think. By the 30-minute mark, she was done. Fully done. A glance around showed most students still stuck halfway through. Grace, her friend from the neighboring school, caught her eye from 2 rows down and gave her a subtle thumbs up. Aaliyah smiled, tucked her paper neatly back into the folder, and stood to submit it early. That was her first mistake. As she approached the judges' table, Mr. Cartwright looked up from his clipboard. "Done already?" he said loudly, enough for nearby students to hear. A few heads turned. "Yes, sir," Aaliyah answered, keeping her voice steady. Cartwright's eyes narrowed. His gaze flickered from her face, to her skin tone, to the time clock on the wall. "And you're confident with your answers?" "Yes, sir." Cartwright chuckled under his breath. "Well, we'll just see about that." Aaliyah handed over her paper and returned to her seat, ignoring the murmurs now rippling around her. The second round, oral questions, moved fast. One by one, students were called to the microphone. When it was Aaliyah's turn, she answered 3 complex questions in under 40 seconds, each with precise explanations. The crowd started noticing. By the time the final scores were tallied, whispers filled the gym. How's she doing that fast? Did she get the questions early? Maybe. Someone gave her the answers. The results board lit up. First place, Aaliyah Johnson, 98 out of 100. A shocked gasp swept through the audience. Mr. Cartwright stood from the judges' table. His voice cut sharply through the noise. "Before we announce final awards," he said, glancing at Aaliyah, "I have some concerns about the integrity of today's results." A heavy silence fell over the room. Aaliyah's stomach dropped, and just like that, her biggest achievement was already being questioned. The gymnasium fell painfully silent. Every eye turned toward Aaliyah. She felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands, resting on her lap, started to tremble. She locked her fingers together, willing herself not to show weakness. Mr. Cartwright cleared his throat, standing taller at the judges' table. "I've been running this competition for over 15 years, he began, his voice booming against the gym's acoustics. "And in all that time, I've never seen a student finish the written round that fast. Not with that level of accuracy." A ripple of murmurs broke out from the crowd. Jason Whitaker, one of the top-ranking white students from the neighboring school, snickered from the third row. "Guess we all know how she pulled that off," he whispered just loud enough for nearby students to hear. Aaliyah's cheeks flushed hot. Her eyes stung, but she kept her chin up. Mr. Cartwright continued, "For the integrity of this competition, and out of fairness to the other students," he paused dramatically, looking straight at her, "I'm placing an immediate hold on your score, pending an investigation." Gasps echoed from the audience. Aaliyah's heart dropped. Was this really happening? Her name on the leaderboard, now marked with a blinking asterisk, a silent accusation. Grace, sitting nearby, shot up from her seat. "That's not fair," she called out, her voice shaking but loud. Mr. Cartwright ignored her. "This student will be required to redo select problems under supervision, right now, in front of the panel, to confirm her authenticity." More whispers. Some students pulled out their phones, already filming. Aaliyah's ears rang. Her mind spun. She wasn't just being accused, she was being put on trial, publicly, without warning. Her mom, sitting in the parents' section, stood halfway but seemed frozen between fight and disbelief. Aaliyah swallowed hard. Part of her wanted to run, leave the gym, disappear. But another part, stronger, rose in her chest like a growing flame. Not this time, not again. She stood. Her legs felt like stone, but she moved forward, climbing the steps to the judge's table. As she reached the microphone, she caught Mr. Cartwright's cold stare. "I didn't cheat," she said, voice low but steady. "Then prove it," Cartwright shot back. A staff volunteer placed a fresh answer sheet in front of her, along with a marker. Cartwright pulled 3 of the hardest problems from the original set. "Here," he said, tapping the paper. "Show us. Live." The room grew deathly quiet. Every eye stayed locked on her. Grace sat at the edge of her seat, her fists clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Aaliyah picked up the marker. Her palms were sweaty. Her heart pounded. But as she looked at the first problem, something clicked. This was familiar. Not just the problem, but this feeling. She'd been here before, people doubting her, expecting her to fail, waiting for her to crack. Not today. With deliberate movements, she started to write. Step by step, line by line. Her method wasn't what they expected. It wasn't the standard school-taught formula. It was something different. A shortcut she had discovered late at night, scribbling on her bedroom wall when insomnia wouldn't let her sleep. An approach born out of trial, error, and pure creative instinct. As her pen glided across the page, the audience leaned forward. Even Mr. Cartwright started to frown. Not out of skepticism, but out of confusion. This wasn't cheating. This was something you all knew. Aaliyah's marker moved with steady purpose. Her handwriting was quick but clean, each step flowing into the next. She wasn't second-guessing anymore. For months, she'd practiced solving complex problems her own way, finding patterns where others saw only walls of numbers. The first problem, done. The second, solved in under a minute. By the time she reached the third, a ripple of murmurs began moving through the audience again. But this time, the tone had shifted. Grace leaned forward in her seat, her eyes wide. Wait, is she using substitution inside a quadratic optimization? one student whispered. "No way, that's not even in our textbook," said another. At the judges' table, Mr. Cartwright's face twisted with growing disbelief. He flipped through the original answer keys on his clipboard, comparing step by step. What Aaliyah was doing didn't match the standard solution paths, not even close. She was bypassing half the traditional steps, cutting directly through the heart of the problem with an unorthodox sequence of substitutions and variable manipulations. Cartwright's pen tapped furiously against the desk. He leaned toward the other judges. "I don't like this," he muttered. One of the assistant judges, Mr. Reyes, a younger math teacher from another district, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Her answers are technically correct," Reyes whispered. "It's unconventional, but the logic holds." Cartwright waved him off. "We're not here to reward shortcuts." Aaliyah capped her marker, stepped back from the whiteboard. Her heart pounded in her chest. She turned to face the judges. "There," she said simply. A few students applauded softly. Grace clapped louder. But Cartwright stood. "This isn't how we teach these problems," he said sharply. "This method is questionable." Another student in the audience called out, "But she got it right." Cartwright's face darkened. "I don't care if it's technically right," he snapped. "Showboating with risky shortcuts doesn't prove mastery. It just raises more questions about how you learned this method in the first place." The accusation lingered heavy in the air. Aaliyah felt her throat tighten. Hot, angry tears pressed at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Grace stood up from the audience. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "She just solved 3 of the hardest problems on the spot, under pressure, and still you're acting like she doesn't belong here." Several students nodded in agreement. Even Mr. Reyes looked uneasy, but Cartwright doubled down. "I won't allow this competition standards to be undermined," he said, voice cold as stone. "I'm recommending disqualification." Gasps broke out. Aaliyah's mom stood abruptly in the parent section. "You can't be serious," she yelled, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and fury. Cartwright ignored her. The entire gym seemed to hold its breath, and just as Aaliyah felt her knees weaken, a voice from the far side of the judges' table spoke. "Firm, clear. Hold on." It was Mr. Reyes. He stood, papers in hand, turning to face the audience. "I don't agree," he said. "This student didn't cheat. She demonstrated a level of mathematical creativity and problem-solving we should be celebrating, not punishing." Another ripple of whispers. Cartwright's face reddened. "This isn't your call, Reyes." Mr. Reyes stood taller. "Maybe not, but I'm submitting a formal objection to your recommendation." For the first time all morning, a glimmer of hope flickered inside Aaliyah. But this battle wasn't over yet. Aaliyah stood frozen near the whiteboard, her palms still damp, heart pounding in her chest. For a few seconds it felt like the entire gymnasium became 2 worlds. One where Mr. Cartwright stood, fuming, face tight with indignation, and the other where Mr. Reyes remained standing tall beside the judges' table, holding his ground. "I'm filing a formal objection," Reyes repeated, louder this time. The audience stirred. Parents began murmuring among themselves. Students shifted in their seats. Phones lifted. More people started recording. Aaliyah's mom pressed forward toward the front row, eyes burning with a protective fury only a parent could carry. Cartwright sneered. "You're out of line, Reyes," he snapped. "This is about academic integrity, about following process. It's about fairness," Reyes countered. "And right now, you're punishing a student not because she was wrong, but because you don't understand her method." More gasps. Grace stood up again. now joined by 2 other students from different schools. "She solved it live," one boy shouted. "What else do you want from her?" another girl added. Mr. Cartwright slammed his palm on the table, rattling the water bottles. "This isn't a popularity contest," he barked. The air in the gym thickened like a summer storm about to break. Aaliyah swallowed hard. Her legs felt shaky, but she forced herself to step forward, toward the microphone near the judges. Her voice came out softer than she wanted, but steady. "May I explain my method?" she asked. Cartwright opened his mouth, ready to deny her, but Reyes raised his hand first. "I think we'd all like to hear it," Reyes said. The crowd murmured in agreement. Cartwright shot him a glare, but remained silent. Aaliyah took a deep breath. Her hands shook as she picked up the marker again. She turned back to the board. "The reason I finished so quickly," she began, her voice gaining strength with every word, "is because I wasn't solving each problem the way we're taught in class." She started sketching out variables, drawing quick graphs alongside her work. "For this quadratic problem, instead of expanding and factoring step by step, I used a vertex form shortcut I developed last semester. It cuts calculation time by almost half if you already know how to estimate vertex shifts." She moved to the second problem. "For the geometric proof, I substituted using coordinate geometry to bypass traditional Euclidean steps. Less writing, same logic flow. And the third, for the optimization problem, I recognized a hidden pattern similar to one I worked on during independent study. It let me skip a redundant step and go straight to the solution." Her marker squeaked against the board as she finished writing. She capped it, turned, and faced the judges. "And that's how I did it," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word, but it didn't matter. The gym fell completely silent. Reyes nodded, visibly impressed. From the back rows, a slow clap started. One parent, then a student, then another. Within moments, the entire room was applauding, except for Cartwright. His face turned beet red. He adjusted his blazer, grabbed his clipboard, and sat down abruptly, saying nothing. But Aaliyah wasn't done. She turned, scanning the room, then added, voice loud and clear, "I didn't cheat. I didn't guess. I didn't get lucky." Her gaze locked on Cartwright. "I worked for this." The applause grew louder, and for the first time all day, Aaliyah smiled. But inside, she knew there was still more ahead. The applause echoed long after Aaliyah stepped down from the whiteboard. She sank into her seat next to Grace, her heart still pounding. Grace leaned over, whispering fiercely, "That was legendary." Aaliyah allowed herself a shaky smile, but deep down, she knew the fight wasn't over. At the judges' table, Mr. Cartwright huddled with the other 2 judges, his voice low but sharp. Mr. Reyes, still standing, crossed his arms, waiting. Within minutes, an announcement came over the loudspeaker. "The judges will now take a brief recess to deliberate on the final scores," the announcer said. Gasps rippled again. Aaliyah's mom stood at the bottom of the bleachers, staring at the judges' table like she was ready to storm the stage. Grace squeezed Aaliyah's shoulder. "Don't worry," she said softly. "They can't ignore what you just did." But Aaliyah wasn't so sure. She watched as Cartwright led the other judges into a small side room off the gym, slamming the door behind them. Inside, the argument began almost immediately. "This is setting a dangerous precedent," Cartwright hissed. "We let one student pull a stunt like that, and every kid next year will think they can ignore standard methods." Reyes shook his head. "This isn't about precedent. It's about recognizing actual mathematical thinking. You saw her work. It's sound." Cartwright jabbed a finger toward him. "She embarrassed this panel, Solving problems that fast with untested methods in front of everyone, it undermines our authority. It exposes our bias, Reyes shot back. Silence. The third judge, Mr. Chen, quiet until now, spoke up. She solved the problems under pressure, in real time, in front of witnesses. I say we let her score stand. Cartwright clenched his jaw, his face twisted with something between pride and pure ego. After a long, heavy pause, he finally said, "Fine. But don't expect me to congratulate her." The door opened. The judges filed back in. The audience quieted instantly. Aaliyah's stomach knotted as she sat on the edge of her seat. Mr. Cartwright stepped up to the microphone. "After further review," he began, every word sounding like it had to be dragged from his throat, "the judges have decided that Aaliyah Johnson's score will stand." An explosion of cheers broke out. Grace whooped loudly, pumping her fist in the air. Aaliyah's mom covered her mouth, tears running down her cheeks. Aaliyah froze, staring at the stage, barely breathing. Did she hear that right? She did. Her score would stand. Her victory was real. As applause roared around her, Aaliyah felt the tension start to leave her chest. For the first time that day, she felt like she could finally breathe. But deep inside, she also knew. This wasn't just a win for her. This was a win for every kid who'd been doubted, dismissed, and pushed aside. And her story was far from over. The announcement hung in the air like electricity. Aaliyah's name stayed at the top of the scoreboard. Final. Unchallenged. Her classmates and even students from rival schools were still clapping as she sat there, still processing it all. Grace wiped a tear from her eye. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Aaliyah let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling from the adrenaline crash. But the moment of peace didn't last long. The announcer's voice returned through the speakers, and now we'll begin the awards ceremony. Aaliyah's heart lurched. This was it. Winners were called by division: bronze, silver, gold. As students went up, there were smiles, photos, applause. Then finally, for first place, overall top scorer in this year's Regional Math Invitational, Aaliyah Johnson. The gym erupted. Even some parents from other schools stood to applaud. Grace grabbed Aaliyah's hand, practically pulling her to her feet. Aaliyah's mom had her phone up, recording through blurry, happy tears. Walking to the stage, Aaliyah felt every step like it weighed 1,000 pounds. When she reached the podium, Mr. Cartwright stood there holding the gold medal and small trophy. Their eyes met. For a brief second, Aaliyah saw something flicker behind his stern expression. Was it regret? Or just bruised ego? Cartwright extended the medal toward her. His voice stayed low, meant only for her ears. "Well, at least you're good at showing off," he muttered, forcing the medal over her neck. Aaliyah froze, her stomach twisted. Even now? Even after everything? Before she could react, he stepped back to the microphone, plastering on a thin, professional smile. "Let's hear it for Miss Johnson, quite the performer today." The words dripped with sarcasm. A hush fell over the crowd. People looked at each other. Some students glared at Cartwright. But before the awkwardness could settle too deep, Aaliyah stepped forward. She lifted the microphone. Her voice shook at first, but steadied with every word. "Today wasn't about performance," she said, her gaze steady on Cartwright. "It was about proving that different doesn't mean wrong." A pause, then she added, "And sometimes the smartest solution doesn't follow your script." The gym exploded into cheers. Grace stood, screaming louder than anyone else. Aaliyah's mom wiped her eyes again, cheering so loud her voice cracked. Aaliyah clutched her trophy, stepped down from the stage, and walked back to her seat. Her knees still wobbled, her heart still raced. But for the first time, she felt taller, stronger, unstoppable. And as Mr. Cartwright sat stiffly behind the judge's table, refusing to look her way, Aaliyah smiled. Because this story was now hers, and she'd written every line. That night, back at home, Aaliyah sat on her bed, still wearing the medal. Her trophy rested on the nightstand, reflecting the soft glow from her bedroom lamp. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from classmates, distant cousins, even teachers she barely talked to. Grace had already sent a dozen messages, filled with exclamation marks and gifs of people cheering. Aaliyah's mom knocked gently on the door, peeking her head in. "You okay, baby?" she asked. Aaliyah nodded, smiling. "I'm good, actually. I'm great." Her mom's eyes filled again, but she laughed through the tears. "I'm so proud of you." They hugged, holding on a little longer than usual. When her mom finally left, Aaliyah flopped back on her bed, staring at the ceiling. That's when her phone buzzed again. An email notification. The subject line made her sit up instantly. National STEM Scholars Program invitation for Aaliyah Johnson. Her heart stopped. She opened it quickly. "Dear Aaliyah, after observing your performance at the Regional Math Invitational and reviewing your submitted problem-solving methods, we would like to invite you to attend the National Youth Mathematics Symposium this summer in Washington, D.C. We believe your unique approach to problem-solving exemplifies the kind of innovation we strive to support." Aaliyah blinked at the screen, rereading the words over and over. National. Washington, D.C. Her. Tears spilled freely this time. All the late nights, all the moments of doubt, all the times teachers like Mr. Cartwright looked right through her, or worse, tried to push her down. And now, this. She quickly screenshot the email and sent it to Grace. Within seconds, Grace replied, "I told you! You're a legend!" Aaliyah laughed out loud, wiping her face. Minutes later, her mom came rushing back in, breathless. "I just saw your email," she said, holding her phone. "You're going to D.C., baby." They both jumped in excitement, spinning around the tiny bedroom like kids. Down the hallway, her younger brother poked his head out of his room, confused. "Why's everyone screaming?" Aaliyah just laughed harder. That night, as she lay in bed, metal still around her neck, one thought stayed with her. Today, she proved them wrong. But tomorrow, she'd prove herself right. And this time, on a national stage. Monday morning. As Aaliyah walked through the front doors of Lincoln High, everything felt different. The same worn-out tiles, the same faded bulletin boards, but now, every step felt lighter. Students who never spoke to her were now nodding as she passed. Some even smiled. Others whispered her name like it carried new weight. In her first period math class, the atmosphere shifted the second she entered. Even Mr. Cartwright, standing stiffly at the front with his usual stack of worksheets, hesitated mid-sentence when he saw her. There was a long pause. Then, clearing his throat awkwardly, he said, "Miss Johnson, I heard about D.C." Aaliyah froze for half a second, then simply nodded. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice even but cool. Cartwright looked down at his papers, not meeting her eyes again. Grace waved from her desk by the window, grinning ear to ear. As Aaliyah slid into her seat, Grace whispered, "National STEM star, sitting right next to me." Aaliyah chuckled, shaking her head. During lunch, several younger students from the freshman class approached her near the courtyard. "Hey, Miss Johnson?" one of them asked shyly. "We heard your story. Do you tutor?" Aaliyah smiled, heart full. "Yeah," she said. I do. Later that afternoon, as she packed up her books, she caught sight of the regional trophy now sitting in the main display case by the office, her name engraved on the brass plate. Walking home, the cool breeze brushed against her skin, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like shrinking into the background. She felt seen, respected, and powerful, because this wasn't just about math anymore. It was about every time she was told she wasn't enough, every time someone questioned her place in the room, and every time she answered in the only way she knew how, by showing them exactly what she could do. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, Aaliyah smiled softly to herself. This was only the beginning. Aaliyah didn't argue, didn't scream, didn't let their doubt define her. She picked up the marker and rewrote the entire conversation. From being called a cheater to standing at the top of the leaderboard, her story is a reminder. Sometimes, the smartest answers don't come from following old rules. They come from daring to create new ones. If you've ever felt underestimated, or like you had to prove your place, let this be your reminder. Keep going, keep creating, keep proving them wrong, one breakthrough at a time. And if stories like this inspire you, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next story that deserves to be heard.